Hey, good morning. This is Trees with Polkadots, and I'm here with the Crafters Classroom class for April. I came on a minute or two early, so just um, wanted to make sure my camera was working. I was having trouble with my camera earlier in the week, so looks like everything's going okay. So I'll just wait a couple minutes for everybody to jump on. Things that you'll need to gather for your that are not in your kit. You need an acrylic block large enough to hold the stamp. This one I have is about 4 by 6, barely fits on there. We probably will have to adjust this down toward the bottom a little bit. All right, so I have a acrylic block big enough to hold the stamp that came in your kit. Something else you'll need that's not in your kit is a water misting tool. This is just a spritzer, just filled with water. So anything will work that you have like that, kind of a finer mist. Another acrylic block if we want to do any stamping with the sayings that are on there. Gonna need some paper towel. We're gonna need a scissors. We're doing some fussy cutting. You want some water-based markers that we're obviously working with some florals here, so I just picked some of my favorite flower colors. You can follow along with what I have here or whatever you enjoy. I'm a pink girl, so I try to stray from that. I just used a little bit of pink in one of the cards, but feel free to use whatever your favorite colors are. And then some black ink, some adhesive, and then I think you're good. Everything else should be in your kit. So I will wait for a few minutes here for people to jump in. And it's a beautiful day here. I hope you're having a beautiful day so far. We're actually going to start with the first card. These are all cut out, so we'll stamp those first and then go from there. So I'll give a couple minutes and we'll get started. So again, what you'll need that's not in your kit is most importantly a water misting tool, some water-based markers that are your favorite floral colors. Obviously you need some greens and then some floral colors. Some adhesive, scissors, black ink, and some acrylic blocks. So I think everything else should be in your kit. All right, and then we'll get started. So the first one we're gonna work on is this card here. Now you should have a color copy of all the cards so that you can kind of follow along and look at that. Hopefully that helps. But we're gonna start with this one. So we're gonna stamp these 3 flowers and then we'll let them dry before we start cutting them out. All right, so this first one here, I'm actually gonna zoom in a little bit more. Okay, so that's our end result. So the first card in your kit should be, it should include a black base layer and then the white that we're stamping on, or that later, and then a smaller white piece that we're going to stamp the 3 different flowers on. It also has a couple of foam squares because a couple of these flowers are pop dotted. So we will just set that off to the side. We don't need the base card just yet or the envelope. So again, if you're just joining me, everything should be in your kit except for you need a large acrylic block to hold the stamp that came in your kit, a smaller acrylic block to hold the sayings, and then some water-based spring-colored markers, a couple of different greens and some favorite floral colors work really nice. A scissors, you'll need some paper towel, a water spritzing tool is what you'll need, and we'll get started. So like I said, we're going to make this card first. So we're going to stamp 3 times on the smaller piece that came in your kit that had this in the card, in the envelope. It also had some foam squares. So this is the card set that we're going to be using. So we're going to stamp 3 times, 3 different colors on this smaller white piece. So this is going to be for our base later. So this is what we're working on. So go ahead and attach your stamp to your acrylic block. The only flower that we're using is this one here. So I did a pink and kind of orange and a red. So we'll start with whatever color, doesn't matter. And you just swipe your marker along the top of that flower. Now this is a penny black stamp. Obviously you've seen that. This is red rubber. There's a lot of detail that's already in the stamp. You can probably see that. So once you have that just kind of all colored, you're going to take your water misting tool and hold it off to the side, let it kind of rain down as you spray and let it fall down onto the color. And then we're going to stamp on the white. We need to get 3 flowers out of here, so 1, 2, 3, all right? So I have to go off camera for this, but you're going to just hold the spritzer above your stamp so that the water falls gently down onto that colored image. It's just going to re-moisten that color. This is what I like about this technique, is that you can take your time coloring and then just come back, re-moisten, and stamp. So I'm just going to go down in this corner here and stamp my image. We're going to do that 2 more times with the other 2 colors. If you want to use the same colors or change it up, you go right ahead. But now we need to clean this off so we can use a different color. And that's simply done by spraying it off with more water and then just dabbing it on some paper towel to get it clean so that we can use a different color. So I'm doing off camera. So now I got my stamp is clean again. And now I'm going to do the same thing, just using a different color, kind of this orangish one there. So it's going to drag it across the top of that same flower. And we just need the flower portion. And anybody have any comments, you can let me know. It's a beautiful day here in Wisconsin. I hope it's beautiful wherever you are. All right, so again, just a little bit of water that I'm going to spray down. Keep your misting tool above and let the spray kind of land down on top. And it takes a little bit of practice to kind of get the feel for how much water you need. But I generally like to overcompensate than undercompensate, because then if you overcompensate, it's just a little more watercolory look. So that's okay. I'd rather do that than undercompensate where it looks too dry. All right, we have room for a 3rd one here. That's going to be my pink one. So I just go back, clean off my flower that I just stamped, and dab it on some paper towel. The nice thing about this using water-based markers is it cleans up with water. So very easy cleanup. And I'm going to use a pink color. I'm just dragging it over there. So this only works with a water-based marker. It will not work with like alcohol inks or anything like that. So now my pink color, and then my water. I'm going to spray it, and then I'll stamp over here in the corner that I have left. Hi, honey. All right. And once you do this a few times, you get to know a feel for how much water you should be using. Again, I like to overcompensate, so it gives me a little more of a watercolor look. And Now I have my 3 colors. I'm actually going to set this off to the side and let them dry before we start cutting, because we're going to cut those 3 out. Oh, that's right. We got to do our little leaves here. So I'm going to clean off the floral part of that stamp. We're going to spritz a few little of the leaves. And so I'm going to color just the kind of the thicker leaf portions to get some that we can use in the background here. So can you fill this up for me? All right, I have another one right here. I just need that one with water. Okay, so then I'm going to take a green and I'm just going to kind of ink up some of these leaves here, some of the bigger, longer ones, kind of in the middle of the stamp. So I'm going to use this right here. Spritz a little bit of water. And then I'm just going to stamp where I have some room for cutting out later. So there. And then it's the same color, so I don't have to clean it off. I'm just going to reapply my color. And if you're coloring and stamping right away, you don't often need a whole lot of water because the stamp is still kind of moist. So stamping there with my green. And then I'll do one more. And we're gonna let this all dry. When you're using just a portion of your stamp, it's important that everything else is clean so that there's no other color that's showing up. So I'm just gonna go down in here. So now I have my 3 flowers. I have several little green leaves that I can choose later, and we're going to use those in the background. So let's set that off to the side to dry, and we will move on to our next card, which is this one. I'm going to come in a little closer here. Okay, obviously we're going to use the same stamp. I'm going to just clean it off from the leaves that we just did. And again, using water-based markers, it's easy to clean up just using water. So I have paper towel behind or with me, and I just spritz my stamp and dry it off with a paper towel. Easy enough to clean. All right. So now we are going to be coloring this section of the stamp, so like this area. You know, this stamp is very large, especially for A2 cards, so that's why it's nice to kind of use just a portion of the stamp. And in the first card, we used actually just 1 flower and some of the leaves. So you don't have to necessarily use it just as it comes. Just by moving positions or using portions of it gives you lots of different options for a larger stamp. But we are going to take out your next set, and that one has the black border and then a white portion. That's what we're going to be stamping on. You can set the envelope and the base card off to the side and come back to that later. You also should have a color copy of what the final cards look like in your kit, so you can kind of use that as we go. Use your favorite colors. I am going to need a piece of scrap paper because we're going to off stamp, and by that I mean we're going to stamp off like the side right here. So that's good, Bonnie. So let's get coloring. So we're working with mostly this part of the stamp. And I like to start with the interior colors and kind of work my way out so that I don't have to try to go back in and disturb maybe the colors that I already have. So I'm going to start with the center of those flowers with a kind of a golden orangey color. It's actually the orange that I used on the last card. So I got that colored in. That's the only place I use that color. Oops. So let's move on to, I'll start with that purple then. And it doesn't matter how long it takes you to color, so don't feel rushed, because we're going to remoisten it with water, and that's the trick. It just remoistens that color, and you can then stamp. So you could set this down and go answer the door or whatever you might have to do and come back to it later, and this technique still works. All right, so just coloring, I chose purple here. And you can see now too that this is not a solid red rubber. There's definition in the stamp that gets you some different variations in color and texture. All right, so I have my purple done there. And then I'm going to move into the green. And this is a little trickier. You have to kind of pay a little more attention. There's a little more delicate areas here. So just working around. And I'm only going about this far in the stamp. So I'm not worried about the far right. Just mainly focused on these three flowers in this area. That's all we're using. I would definitely overcompensate over here to get some of that green in case, depending on your placement, where you end up stamping, you could have a little extra there. Nobody's going to know if you miss something, but okay, so I think I got everything pretty good. And the last thing we have is these little, I chose like a blue and a turquoise, so I chose a lighter bluish turquoise color and a little bit darker in the center. If you don't have two different colors like that, doesn't matter. You can just use a solid. That's fine too. So I'll do the center because that's a little bit easier to get in, so that way you're not disturbing if you color the outside first. So we'll get those darker centers in on those blue ones, coming in with a lighter color then surrounding that darker. And again, you can take your time getting the color placed on. Because we're going to get that color come back to life with a fine mist of water. All right, so I think I have everything colored to the section that I'm looking at or need. So we are going to use some scrap paper. It's a little bit big. I just need to worry about it going off over here. So kind of to get yourself an eye of where you're going to stamp, kind of hover it above. You don't want to stamp it right now, but just to get an idea of where you're placing. We're down to the bottom and off to the left. And so you want to kind of get this flower over here, and everything down here should be off on the bottom. So I kind of get a little idea where I want to put it. Now I'm going to go off camera, use my water misting tool, and spray. So I want to spray above the stamp once I turn it over so that my water rains down on top of the image. And I'm going off camera for that, so once you're going to keep spritzing. It took us a little longer to color this one, so you might need a little more water. So you can kind of see it puddle up on the stamp, the color. And once you see it kind of pooling is when you know you want to stamp. So I kind of already prejudged where I want to go, so I'm going to come over here and stamp. And voila. So I did use quite a bit of water on mine, more so than in this one. That's okay. Gives me a little more watercolor look. It's definitely different, but that's the unique part of this style of stamping. So let's just set that off to dry for a little bit. Mine's a little bit wet, so I'm going to set that over there. You can see the difference. Now, let's take your envelope that came with that, and we're going to do what we call generation stamping. So I'm still going to use the same color. I didn't touch anything yet. And we're going to stamp on the envelope. Now I'm going to go into this lower right corner. I'm going to put the envelopes. Oh, hold on. So this is what the envelope is going to look like. So we're going to just go in this lower right corner. There's still enough color on the stamp that you don't need to recolor, but you want to re-moisten it a little bit. Won't take a lot because there's still a bit of water left behind. And mine was already pretty wet, so I'm not going to use a whole lot of water. Just going to come here in the corner of the envelope and stamp. So now I have what we call a second generation stamp. So I didn't have to recolor, which is great, and then I still get a nice image. You could probably do this another 2 or 3 times. Each time it's going to get a little lighter, but at least you don't have to recolor, and you can still use what you had left behind so that your original coloring gives you 3 or 4 different images. So again, a really nice fun technique for this type of coloring. You get several images with one coloring, so that's fun. All right, we're gonna let that dry. Mine's kind of wet, so we'll come back to that one. Moving on to the last card, which is this one, and it's just the base card that's in your kit. The base card and the envelope. So we're going to use both. We're going to stamp directly on the base card, and then we're going to do that second generation stamping on the envelope, just like we did on the last card. All right, so the envelope will set off to the side. The base card is what we're going to stamp on. There's a trick to folding the base card. If you've heard me say this 1,000 times, I apologize, but I say it every single time. But it's important. So when you get a card that's already scored, you want the bump side of the scored part to go to the inside of the card. So it's almost the opposite way that you want to fold it. So the bump goes to the inside. I'm going to reopen it so I don't have that flapping up at me. And you should have a color copy of all 3 cards so you can kind of follow along. This is our end result. So we're going to do all the floral first, which means the one we just did, unless you want to keep the same colors, you're going to have to clean your stamp. So by cleaning it is as simple as, is that full? Yeah. As simple as just spraying water, lots of it, on your stamp. And once it's full of water, then you can just dab it off on some paper towel. And that's a great way to clean your stamp, which is nice because this is you're using water-based markers, so all you need is water to clean it. All right. And then I dabbing off the stamp with the paper towel. Okay, now I can easily switch to different colors. So for this one, I did kind of a yellow, kind of a golden yellow, and then more of a orange, and then I did that red. I use the same orangish color in the center of these flowers. That's where I'm going to start. I like to work from the kind of the center out so that you're not playing around and touching colors inadvertently as you try to color other things. So let's start with this orange color here in the middle of these 3 flowers. And then we're actually going to do the green, and then we'll come back to the other flowers. All right, so in the center here, these 3 flowers, just doing the center right now. Okay, now I'm going to do the green. And kind of coming in. You have to pay a little more attention to these green ones. And I know it's hard to see on the red rubber sometimes where you're actually trying to color. So actually the back of the package has a nice image. Or you can use the color copy or the photo that I sent you in your kit, just to kind of see where everything green should be, because there's like green in these tiny little spots that we haven't worked with yet. So again, on the back of the package is a good reference. And simply you can use the sharp end of your tip of your marker, and then the wider areas you can just kind of drag it along. And again, you can take your time doing this because we are going to come back and get it all nice and wet again to release that color right before we stamp. I think I got the green everywhere that I want. So then we'll start with the flowers. Let's do these inside ones. I know it's opposite of what we're doing here, but these here, which would mean these 3 here. And I'm going to use kind of a reddish color that we used on that first set. So I really only have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 colors maybe. But you can see just with the variety, just by changing up colors here and there, they all look so different. So it's same stamp, but just by using different colors gets you obviously different images, which is kind of nice to have that potential for variety. Now I'm gonna learn from my last card. I used a little bit too much water, but look, it still turned out so pretty. Really nice. I know. It's more of a watercolor look. So no right or wrong here. Sometimes it's just a little bit of practice. And okay, so now I have those 3 colored in. I'm going to move on to my bigger one here. Kind of used a yellow color there. Ooh. And it is kind of hard to see, depending on your color, where you've actually colored, especially on the red rubber. So I'm just going to make sure I got everything covered. Okay, the last thing I have left is these orange flowers that are up in here. So I'll do that next. I actually did not do any different in the center of these. So I'm just coloring the whole thing. Now if you want, you could probably come back and dab a little something darker in the center of these. Certainly that's doable. Be careful down in here if you got your green, like in here where you're coloring, and if you're dragging, at least the green shows up a little better on the red rubber. Kind of see where that's at. Just trying to be a little more careful. Down in here. This is the last color we got going on. Don't forget this little guy over here. All right. I have everything colored. So all my color is on the stamp. Next step is to get it re-moistened, get that ink nice and juicy, and we're going to stamp directly on the front of our card. So just acclimate yourself to where that center is. I don't want to fold it because then you got this flapping up at you. So you want it flat. And then just acclimate yourself to where that top of the card is so that you kind of know where you're going to stamp. I'm going to put a little bit of a scrap paper down here because I might stamp off a little bit on the bottom. Okay, next step is to get your water misting tool. I'm probably not going to use as much water as I did the last time. Again, this is always kind of a little bit of a trial and error. No right and wrong, but just kind of, once you see it start to kind of pool up, you'll probably see it on your darker colors first. A little easier to see. And then we're going to stamp the whole image on the front of the base card. And go about here. And that's my image. Very pretty, a little bit brighter than the colors that I used before. I left a little area up here to stamp a little saying. So you got a bit of room up here for that. We're gonna let that one dry. Let's go back to our first card, which is, this is the final result. This is what we started stamping with. So we are gonna do some fussy cutting, and you should have, what came in that set was a black background and then the white, which is what we're gonna be attaching to, and then also some pop dots should have been in your 3 foam squares, I should say. So you're gonna need these two because this pink one is pop dotted. So we're gonna take a little bit of time and just cut these images out. So I have some leaves. I like to leave a little bit of margin as I cut. And for the leaves, if you have some extra room at the bottom here, leave it there because we can use it as we tuck it in behind the flowers. So I guess while we're cutting, we can give away a prize. And no, because I got to cut with me. It's okay. Bonnie's here helping me. So we're just going to take a little bit of time here. So as you get your pieces cut out, just set them off to the side. Sometimes it's easier to cut them apart so you're not trying to deal with the whole piece of paper. Again, I like to leave a little margin all the way around, because if you try to cut right on the line and you don't, then you can tell. So if you leave a little margin all the way around, I like that.
And that white fades out from the white
Yeah,
anyways.
exactly. All right, so I got a flower there, I got some greens. Okay, so Bonnie's gonna help me. We're gonna, again, leave a little bit of extra on that base of those leaves. We're going to tuck them behind the flowers. Okay, so everybody's name got placed in a basket who bought a kit, and we're going to pick somebody. So hopefully you're watching today if you bought a kit and you're following along. And so this is a fun way to use just one portion of that stamp, right? Like we didn't have to use the whole stamp. I really liked the that flower. And so I just wanted to use it several times. All right, where's it? The giveaway that I have, keep cutting, but I have a stamp set by Penny Black, which is the same type of slapstick cling. So this would be the same technique that we're using today. And a Love Quotes stamp saying set. I said that wrong. A Love Saying stamp set. So those are going to go to the lucky winner. And Bonnie's going to choose a name out of the basket here. And we're going to just keep cutting along. The winner is dun, 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 dun. Come on. Anticipation, right? Donna Hinshaw. Congratulations, Donna. We're going to send that out to you next week. Thanks for buying a kit. Hopefully you're following along today. If not, you can always watch us later. And I'm going to cut out this last flower and the last green, and then we're going to assemble. So you're going to want to have some adhesive nearby, and you also have, I gotta stand up a little bit, I'm crouched over my table, so. You also have 3 foam squares that we're gonna use to pop one of those flower heads. All right, here we go. Okay, we got all our cutting done, so now we're going to be assembling and arranging. So the first step would be to attach this white to your black, if I can get it. And I use 2-sided tape. Use whatever you like. Tape runners, liquid glue, whatever you're used to using, doesn't matter here. Sometimes it matters if you're attaching little small pieces, like some of the leaves. The leaves are actually only attached under the flowers in this one, so they kind of spring off the card, so they're not attached flat. Just go ahead and center that onto the black so you have even margins all the way around. And then we're going to just start kind of arranging that pink one. That's my favorite color, so I kind of left that one for last, so I see that one the most. So I'm going to attach the red one down in this lower left corner. This is going to be flat, and then the orange one. Now you want to kind of leave some area not attached so that you can slip in some of these greens, at least one up there, okay? So let's do that red one first in the corner. And I know I'm going to want some green here, so I didn't solidly attach it. So coming in with my next color. And this is where I want to be able to attach that green in there a little bit. And I'll probably go about like that. And then the pink one, we're going to pop that on top of those. We also have some greens left. I used a portion of this third one if you want to keep it all together. Otherwise, you'd kind of cut it and sort of like arrange it like that. This is pop dotted here, so you're going to have to attach these here, but they're going to be under. So I'm just going to put a piece of tape there. It's two-sided tape, and then place them so then I can just attach my pink one like that. We're going to use the pop dots for that, or the foam squares, sorry. You can see a little bit of my tape, so I'm just going to try to scooch that over. Okay. So using my foam squares on the back of this one. Now, to save a little bit of time, we're not going to do the saying stamp, the sayings. And there's a couple reasons for that. Not only to save time, but you might want to say something else other than just a note to say get well soon. Now, this is the note builder set. So you have the word note, and then you have all these options to use to what you want to say there. So we'll leave that blank for now, just because you might want to say that I'm thinking of you and not so much that you want to say get well. So we'll let that be. So this card then we're just going to attach to the base card that came with it. So again, it's this one. And again, the bump that if it's scored already goes to the inside of the card. So folding it opposite of the way you feel like it should go. And then we're going to attach this to the front. And then we'll be done with our first card. So it was nice we had time to let those 3 flowers dry. It dries pretty quickly, but depending on how much water you use. All right. And this comes down in here. Again, equal margins all the way around, left, right, top, bottom. And then you have room to stamp here. So our first card is complete. We're on to the second card, which is this, plus our envelope that we did, which turned out really pretty. This was my card in class. Now you can see, look at the difference. Look how watercolory that looks versus my first one, which is still beautiful. But because I used a bit more water, gave me a lot more watercolor look. Okay, so play around with that. Again, we're not going to stamp up here, but you have lots of room to figure out a saying that you want there. So this simply goes onto the back, the black piece that was in that card set. You'll notice I got a lot more margin on the edge. I generally work with pretty slim margins, but I just wanted something to offset it a little bit more. Our image was smaller, so I'm just using two-sided tape. You can use whatever you like. And I'm going to attach it to that black background. All right.
It looks like a nice picture frame.
Yeah, like a nice, little more margin, gives you a little more standoff look. All right, and this gets attached to our base card.
There's another one in there.
Again, holding it bump to the inside. And we have an adorable envelope that we can send it in. Again, we probably could have got another stamping off of that one. For sure. Obviously it's going to be a little lighter in color, but still a nice image. So this gets centered on the front of that base card. Again, we're going to leave that for the moment, just because you might want to say something else than what I have here. Again, I just love this. And again, we just used a portion of the stamp. We used just this area here. So even though it's a larger stamp, you can kind of pick and choose areas that you don't have to use it as it is. So, right. So this one is done, and then this was our envelope. That goes with that card. So pretty. Love it. Last card really is complete other than where you want to stamp. So we left a little bit of room up here for you to include a little saying, or you don't have to. Maybe you want to just say happy birthday. But this was our envelope that went with that card, and we just used this part, generation stamping. So we stamped the whole thing, re-moisten it again, and then just not even having to recolor, was able to stamp on the envelope. So obviously you can see it's a lighter variation, but still a pretty image. All right, that is our 3 cards today, and made with one stamp. Well, I love that. And you have lots of other sayings that came in your kit along with the stamp. So I hope you enjoyed today's class. I had a blast. I hope it's beautiful where you are and the sun is shining and spring's going to be here soon. And enjoy your day. Thank you.